So I'm going to read through The Explorer's Daughter by Kari Herbert. This is again for your English Language Paper 1. It may come up for question 4 and question 5. Another reminder that you do not get to select the text. The exam board does that for you, so you need to know all those texts that we've covered in class really well. One thing to note is this is autobiographical because the writer is writing about her own experience. So you should expect not only for her to share her experience, but to share her opinions and feelings. And it's also important to note that Herbert lived among the Inuit people as a child. So she is able to give us an insight into this world that more than likely the reader has very little experience of. 2 hours after the last of the hunters had returned and eaten, narwhal were spotted again, this time very close. Within an hour, even those of us on shore could, with the naked eye, see the plumes of spray from the narwhal catching the light in a spectral play of colour. So she's already started to kind of create this beautiful image. 2 large pods of narwhal circled in the fjord, often looking as if they were going to merge, but always slowly, methodically passing each other by. So the movement of the narwhal helped create a tranquil image, the fact that they're moving slowly. But it's interesting that she uses the word methodically to kind of highlight that they are intelligent creatures, which reflects a respect for the narwhal. Scrambling back up to the lookout, I looked across the glittering kingdom in front of me and took a sharp intake of breath. So Herbert uses a metaphor here to create kind of a magical image of this setting. And taking a sharp intake of breath just suggests that she's in awe of these creatures. So again, just this idea that she finds them really beautiful and intriguing. The hunters were dotted all around the fjord. The evening light was turning butter gold, glinting off man and whale and catching the soft billows of smoke from a lone hunter's pipe. So again, we've just got this real kind of calm, tranquil image, which is quite ironic really, because actually this is the setting of a hunt. And later on in the text, we know that obviously the hunter is going to pick up the harpoon and attempt to kill the animal, but she's romanticising this image really, and she's definitely in awe of its beauty, which is quite a contrast to kind of what takes place. From where we sat at the lookout, it looked as though the hunters were close enough to touch the narwhal with their bare hands, and yet they never moved. Distances are always deceptive in the Arctic, and I fell to wondering if the narwhal existed at all, or were instead mischievous tricks of the shifting light. One thing that I forgot to mention as well, placing the man and whale next to each other and saying the sun shines off both of them helps highlight that she sees them as equals, which will later link to this conflict, this dilemma that she experiences while watching this hunt. And again, just this idea that she's not even sure if she can kind of trust what she sees because it's so beautiful, just creates this dreamlike world and just emphasises this beautiful, calm, tranquil scenery. So what we're going to notice between these 2 paragraphs is that the style of writing changes. So we've just read first paragraph, literary style, full of figurative language, and then we move on to this kind of factual, detached tone. The narwhal rarely stray from high Arctic waters, escaping only to the slightly more temperate waters towards the Arctic Circle in the dead of winter, but never entering the warmer southern seas. In summer, the hunters of Thule are fortunate to witness the annual return of the narwhal to the Inglefield Fjord, on the side of which we now sat. The narwhal is an essential contributor to the survival of the hunters in the high Arctic. The mattock or blubber of the whale is rich in necessary minerals and vitamins, and in a place where the climate prohibits the growth of vegetables or fruit, this rich source of vitamin C was the one reason that the Eskimos have never suffered from scurvy. So you'll notice we've got careful language choice here to highlight the necessity of the hunt. So despite romanticising that setting and being in awe of the narwhal, we start to realise that Herbert appreciates why it's so important to hunt them. So we've got words like essential, survival, necessary, rich source, valuable, only. All these things emphasise how necessary it is to hunt these beautiful creatures. She's also listing, I don't know why I've only just underlined this, the list is much longer than that, but she's listing the number of reasons why we can justify hunting narwhal. For centuries, the blubber of the whales was also the only source of light and heat, and the dark, rich meat is still a valuable part of the diet for both man and dogs. A single narwhal can feed a team of dogs for an entire month. Its single ivory tusk, which can grow up to 6 feet in length, was used for harpoon tips and handles for other hunting implements, although the ivory was found to be brittle and not hugely satisfactory as a weapon, for carving protective tupalacs, and even as a central beam of their small ancient dwellings. Strangely, the tusk seems to have little use for the narwhal itself. They do not use the tusk to break through ice as a breathing hole, nor will they use it to catch or attack prey, but rather the primary use seems to be to disturb the top of the seabed in order to catch Arctic halibut, for which they have a particular predilection. Often the ends of their tusks are worn down or even broken from such usage. So we have another list here of all the things that the ivory tusks provide. And then it's juxtaposed with the information that actually the tusks aren't that useful to the narwhal. So again, she's trying to justify hunting them by listing all the things, all the essential materials or equipment that is created by the ivory tusks. So again, we've got this factual language here. The women clustered on the knoll of the lookout, binoculars pointing in every direction, each woman focusing on her husband or family member, occasionally spinning around at a small gasp or jump as one of the women saw a hunter near a narwhal. So the fact that they're clustered suggests that it is an important event, that everyone's come out to look. Now it could be important because it doesn't happen that often, but judging on the previous paragraph, it's important because their lives depend on a successful hunt. Also, the fact that they give out a small gasp or they jump creates suspense and suggests that actually the hunting of narwhal could be very dangerous. Not only the act itself, but I guess if they fail to hunt, that could affect their lives. Each wife knew her husband instinctively and watched their progress intently. It was crucial to her that her husband catch a narwhal. It was part of their staple diet, and some of the mattock and meat could be sold to other hunters who hadn't been so lucky, bringing in some much needed extra income. So we've got the same as the last paragraph, language choice, crucial and much needed, to further emphasise how important and crucial it is that they hunt narwhal for their survival. Every hunter was on the water. So again, this just helps highlight that this is an important event. Not only, so we've got a simile here describing it like a game, which reflects the type of anticipation that you would experience if you were watching a sport, kind of anticipating the end result. But I find this quite interesting when we later see that Herbert states, they don't kill for sport. So it's quite interesting that she does actually describe it like a sport, and quite ironic. The narwhal are intelligent creatures, their senses are keen and they talk to one another under the water. So this is informative again. All this has kind of gone back to a factual tone, but it does help create suspense to think about these creatures as intelligent, because it makes the hunting of them even more dangerous. So in one respect, she's showing her great respect for the animal and how intelligent they are. But on the other, actually, she's showing a lot of respect for the hunter. It can't be easy to hunt an animal so intelligent. And then she goes on to say their hearing is particularly developed and they can hear the sound of a paddling kayak from a great distance. So the fact that these hunters are in their boats right next to the narwhal, if not above them, helps us understand how dangerous that can be. That was why the hunters had to sit so very still in the water. So again, just this building tension as we read. One hunter was almost on top of a pair of narwhal and they were huge. So she's now painting the hunters as vulnerable and encouraging our concern for their welfare. He gently picked up his harpoon and aimed. In that split second, my heart leapt for both hunter and narwhal. It's quite interesting that she says gently. One, it's ironic because he's about to attempt to kill the animal, but linking to something that she says later about them not killing for sport, this encourages this idea that, you know, they're not just doing it for a thrill, they're really thinking about their actions. I urged the man on in my head. He was so close and so brave to attempt what he was about to do. He was miles from land in a flimsy kayak and could easily be capsized and drowned. I forgot to mention, sorry, that she mentions that her heart leapt for both hunter and narwhal. So we've now got this introduction, this idea of conflict being introduced, that she's fearful for both, because if the hunter fails, then his and his wife's lives might be affected, and obviously if he's successful, then the narwhal's going to die. Again, we've got language choice to encourage this idea that the hunters are vulnerable, flimsy kayak, capsized and drowned, and foolhardy. It was a foolhardy exercise and one that could only inspire respect. So that makes it really clear that she has respect for the hunter. And yet at the same time, my heart also urged for the narwhal to dive, to leave, to survive. So the use of triplets reflects her sense of panic at this stage, and again just helps us understand this conflict that she has while watching the hunting of narwhal. This dilemma stayed with me the whole time that I was in Greenland. So she's even saying that she's conflicted here, basically by saying that this is a dilemma. I understand the harshness of life in the Arctic and the needs of the hunters and their families to hunt and live on animals and sea mammals that we demand to be protected because of their beauty. So it's quite interesting that she says we here. I think, I haven't underlined it, sorry, so it's line 54. So she's now starting to consider potentially the reader's point of view, or maybe kind of a more westernised point of view of this type of hunting. And I know that one cannot afford to be sentimental in the Arctic. How can you possibly eat seal? I have been asked over and over again. So here she's addressing potentially the reader's concerns, or other concerns of environmental groups, or what may have been printed in the media, for example. So she's showing that she's very much aware of public opinion and she's directly addressing it. True, the images that bombarded us several years ago of men battering seals for their fur hasn't helped the issue of polar hunting, but the Inuit do not kill seals using this method, nor do they kill for sport. I think she's really tried to reiterate this all the way through, having justified the hunting through use of facts, to highlight how important it is to hunt them to survive. So this killing of sport, exemplified in this image of these battered seals, really contrasts to what we've seen from the hunters, this kind of calm, collected, thoughtful action, especially when he kind of gently picks up his harpoon. They use every part of the animals they kill, and most of the food and fuel is still brought in by the hunter-gatherers and fishermen. Imported goods can only ever account for part of the food supply. There is still only one annual supply ship that makes it through the ice in Kanak, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, and the small twice-weekly plane from the West Greenland can only carry a certain amount of goods. So repetition of only here reflects the limitations of the food supply that they have, and again helps justify the hunting of narwhal. There isn't really any other option, and that's why it's so easy for her to come to this final sentence: hunting is still an absolute necessity in fuel. So here we have her personal opinion, but she's presenting it as fact, so we call that an assertion, and that creates this confident tone. So it's interesting that she's kind of gone from this conflict where she's romanticized the setting, she's shown her kind of love for the animal, but also this great respect for the hunter, and more than that, her understanding of their situation and the necessity to survive. And that brings her to that conclusion that she's confident enough to say, as if it's a fact, that it's an absolute necessity. And the word absolute really helps create that confident tone. So as I always suggest, try and consider how you would answer question 4. Question 4 will always, along the lines, have something to do with thoughts and feelings of the writer. So try and think about the different thoughts and feelings that Herbert has. You do not have to go along with what I've put on the screen. That just gives you an idea. So I might potentially focus on the fact that she shows she respects the narwhal, that she's kind of in awe of them, and then might move on to focus on how she respects the hunter and kind of how dangerous the hunting of narwhal is. And finally, I might leave it with how conflicted she is as well. The examples I've given underneath don't even scratch the surface. There are so many techniques in this that, this just gives you an idea, but please think about what you would feel most comfortable explaining in your exam answer.